Hello, my loves. It's Tiffany, the Miracles Coach. So it is a special episode today. And this one may be a little longer because I have so much to say. But first of all, I want to share that this month marks my 1 year anniversary of being on YouTube. I guess we could call it a YouTube anniversary. But I posted my first video on July 8th, reintroduced myself to the world, shared my origin story, and basically gave God the yes that I had been avoiding for a long time, for months and honestly even years. So you can think of today as kind of a reintroduction, because the very first video I did, it was kind of like, allow me to reintroduce myself. And I started with a quote. Let me see if I can get the quote right today. If you know me based on who I was a year ago, you don't know me at all. My growth game is strong. Allow me to reintroduce myself. And that still applies today. I mean, I think it always applies, especially if you do the work and you know that you're constantly growing and evolving. Like every year you should be a new you. And I feel like I'm the newest me I have ever been. When I tell you that this past year, I've grown so much. I haven't had major growth like this since the places where I can remember the most growth in my life are probably like 2010, 2014, 2018. And it's been like these past few years have been really rough. I just felt like every time I thought that I had grown and I had learned some things, it was more to learn and there was more growth to be done. And there's always growth to be done, right? We're always evolving and all of that. But it's like this year has been, what I think I love most about this year is that even though it's been difficult-ish, it really hasn't been as tumultuous as a lot of the years. The growth hasn't been as difficult and as hard. Like it's actually been quite pleasurable, and I find that to be very interesting. But yeah, the journey has just been, I don't even think there are words to describe it. And honestly, I had no idea what any of this was going to look like, how any of it was going to unfold. I just knew that God asked me to show up. And so I did. And I showed up imperfect. I showed up messy. I showed up like, I just showed up and I was just me. You know, I did the very best that I could. And so much has changed and so much has shifted. And honestly, the shifts that matter most happened on the inside. They happened in who I am and how I move and what I now know is possible and inevitable, honestly, for me and for this brand. And God has truly, when I say God has blown my mind in the past year, I really honestly, again, I mean, I'm sure I'll find words because, you know, that's not hard for me to do, but sometimes it is very difficult to put into words, very difficult to articulate because it's just been extraordinary, miraculous. Yeah. So today I want to share a couple things. And one of the things that I've talked about a lot on the channel recently in the last few months is about decisions. And I don't think that people recognize how important our decisions are. As a matter of fact, it's the first step of my manifestation process. I can teach for hours on the subject because there's so much about decision. And over the past week, God started to download to me a new teaching for the realm. 6 decisions that I believe really set the ball into motion, I think. Is that the saying? It started an absolute, like a literal domino effect that I believe transformed everything. And I've shared this loosely on the channel, but actually over the past week, I think what God wanted me to do was create a framework around this, something that like an actual teaching where I could share the exact steps I took that brought me to the place that I'm at, and that will take me into millions by the end of this year. And the first decision I made was devotion. Right? And I want to be clear about what I mean when I say that, because I'm not talking about discipline. A lot of people talk about discipline. The world teaches discipline. Everybody's always talking about, you got to be disciplined. You got to do this. You got to do that. But a lot of times people don't recognize that discipline happens in the mind. It requires willpower, effort, pushing yourself to show up, even when that might not be the best thing for you. But when you are in a co-creative partnership with God, devotion is a deeper concept. Devotion is a heart posture. It's a spirit posture. And when you are devoted to God, it actually causes you to be devoted to your calling. So you don't really have to force yourself to do the things that you know you're being called to do. You just automatically keep coming back to it because you can't imagine doing anything else. I made a decision that I was going to stay devoted to God above everything else, that I was going to keep him first in my business and my life and every decision that I made. And so I was able to stay devoted to my purpose, my calling to this channel, even when rough patches came, even when I didn't want to show up, even when I didn't feel like it, even when I had to rest, even when there were times that I had to surrender, when I had to step back and take care of myself or my family. I always came back because of the devotion that I have to God. And so it doesn't require willpower. It just requires love. And that never changes. Like my love for God never wavers. And so it allowed me to continue to be who he was calling me to be, even in times when I didn't always know how, even in times when I didn't want to be. And It's interesting because my business has changed so much over the past year too, because it was like pulling teeth to get me to do stuff in my business for the past few years up until last year. I really just wasn't interested. Like I told you guys, I think it was the last audio, one of the last audios, social media I felt like was sucking the life out of me and my business. And it made me not want to run my business anymore. I got so tired of it. And I think it's also, like I told you, because I don't really spend a lot of time on social media. I go there every now and again to check things, but otherwise I'm really not on social media very often. And back prior to 2020, I spent so much time on social media. My kids were younger and things like that. I was entertained by it, but it's changed so much. And honestly, I have changed so much. I just feel like it's not something that I enjoy anymore. And so running my business there didn't feel authentic or natural anymore. It felt more like a burden. And that's another thing that made it very easy for me to be more devoted to my calling, my devotion to God. And then also just knowing that I could be devoted to something that actually felt like me, if that makes sense. And then the second decision I made was transforming my self-concept and how I saw myself. And this was probably, I would say, about 18 months ago. But honestly, I'd say that I didn't really get serious about this until May of last year. So it's only been a tiny bit over a year. And I remember asking ChatGPT, how long does this normally take? Rewiring your brain and reprogramming your subconscious mind. And it said between 3 to 6 months, you should definitely see a difference. And I could definitely see that. But I could say for sure by 6 months, I was a completely different person because my mind had completely changed. And it wasn't just a mindset. Like, yes, I rewired my brain. I also reprogrammed my subconscious, which also affected my nervous system and a lot of other things in the body, because that's where a lot of stuff lives. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. So they stop at the mind. They think reprogramming the mind is enough, but it's not. You have to go deeper than that. And so there's deeper layers to it. And I get into all of it in the realm, and I tell you exactly the steps that I took and the ways that I reprogrammed and all of the things I did that made that shift for me. And that one decision just added to the domino effect, right? And then the third decision was sovereignty. And I think a lot of that came straight from the self-concept work. When I started to see myself differently, I started to see myself as a queen, as a daughter of God. And what I love about being a daughter of God and a daughter of a king is, if you think about it, normally a daughter of a king is a princess. But when you are a daughter of the king, of the Most High, of God, then you're not actually a princess, you're a queen. And so I had to really start seeing myself that way. I had to start seeing myself as a goddess, as an empress, as divinity in human form, right? And I started to make choices that reflected that. I stopped tolerating things that didn't honor who I was. And that changed everything for me, because I started to realize that loving myself and honoring myself was loving and honoring God. Like, if you think about how precious we are to God, you loving on yourself and honoring yourself is loving and honoring God too. And the more I started to see that, the more I was able to own who I was and really allow myself to be all of who I am and truly be who God created me to be. It made a huge difference for me. And then the fourth decision that I made, and these aren't necessarily in any particular order, but I kind of did try to put them in order the best I could. But I think what happens is that different decisions start to affect new decisions or create new decisions. New decisions are birthed. And then it's almost kind of like it layers on top of another thing and on top of another thing. So the self-concept started the sovereignty. And then when I started to get support, and I told you guys about this, when I decided to work with my coach in May of last year, me choosing to receive support, know that I deserve support, invest in myself to have support, and stop trying to do everything alone. Even though I never really did that, because I've always been big on support. So I've never shied away from that, but also having the right support. And that just took the sovereignty to another level. My self-concept, my sovereignty, my understanding of who God created me to be, all of that. Because it's not that I didn't already know that I was one with Source. These are things that I've taught for years, but it's something that you really have to embody, that you really have to, like, it really has to become a part of who you are. Because we can say it all day and we can think it and know it intellectually, but it has to be like, the only word that I can really come up with is embodied. It has to go from the mindset and from the head level to the body. And then the fifth decision that I made was regulation. With the right support, I started to really understand what it truly meant to be one with Source. Like I said, I started to embody the fact that everything we create is from that place of oneness with Source. Because even though I knew that intellectually, in my body, I was living in survival mode and I was in hustle mode and force mode. Even though, like I told you guys, I thought that I was very feminine and very, like, oh, I don't hustle, I don't force, I don't do that. But I did do that because I had an overactive masculine that came through my mother's bloodline, and all of the women in my family work like that. So even though my mind had conceptualized that, okay, I am one with source, I am the author and creator of my reality, but then what lived in my body was, but I have to do this to survive, but I still have to work hard. And not to mention, that's what everybody out here is teaching you too, that hard work is required. And so my body would overpower my mind. But when that landed finally, and I mean really, really landed, like when I really got that part of it, I was able to relax into the process more. And that's when I was able to be like, you know what? I'm not interested in social media anymore. I refuse to continue to do that, right? I was just like, I'm done with that. This is not for me anymore. So I just stopped doing it. And I was able to relax into the process of the YouTube channel. I chose to rest. I chose to surrender. And even surrender itself is regulation, because when you let go, your whole system comes back into congruence, into peace. And so surrender is really big when it comes to regulation, but I had to learn how to sit in it. You remember I was telling you a couple episodes ago, I guess, about sitting in the discomfort. I know that it's not comfortable all the time because we're so used to going and doing everything all the time and doing over being. But it really isn't serving us. And like I said, even if you're reaching success, at what cost? And the thing is that early on, it was really hard for me to do things because I had a lot of dysregulation. It was so difficult. And I didn't realize this. Like early on, every time I tried to work, there would be a bunch of upheaval in my life. Like stuff would just be crazy. And I just didn't understand it. And I was like, why is it that every time I try to work, everything that could happen happens to stop me? And I'm not talking about little distractions and things. I'm talking about people getting sick, things that just didn't make sense. And I realized that it was my nervous system. My nervous system was just like, no, we don't want to do that. And I was just like, well, you can't not want to do it. This is what God is calling us to do. Like, you have to do this, right? And my body was just like, no. And it's interesting because I've been learning that sometimes people think, like a lot of times coaches or people out in the industry will say, you're afraid to be visible or you have a fear of being seen and all of that. And there could have been a level of that, I guess. But at the end of the day, I really don't think it's just a fear of being seen or being visible. I've been visible. I've been very visible in my business. I've had a business for a decade. I know how to be visible and I'm not afraid of it. What I realized and what I learned about myself is that when I was visible, it was a burden. Because I don't think that people realize when you're visible, how much responsibility comes with it. So you end up having to carry a ton of pressure from that. Visibility means I have to manage what I'm doing, first of all, right? Showing up, being consistent in showing up, giving you the message, having a message to even give you. And then you have to make sure you're saying the right things and doing things in a way that's acceptable or politically correct or being obedient and feeling like you're doing what God is calling you to do. And then once you do that, you have to manage now the expectations of how it's going to be received. What are people going to say about it? What are they going to think about it? Are they going to like me? Are they going to leave a negative or nasty comment on my video or something or my audio and say they don't like it or whatever? Like, what is going to happen? And you start micromanaging what's going to happen when you put your message out into the world. And then you have your own things. Like me, I started my business in the middle of homeschooling my 3 oldest daughters. I hadn't had my youngest one yet. And I was homeschooling them for 6 or 7 hours out of the day. And then I still had to work on my business. And not only did I have to work in my business, like behind the scenes, building websites and building programs and doing all of those things, but I was also talking to people every day because I was trying to learn who I wanted to work with and how I could best serve people. I was giving free sessions, doing a whole bunch of free stuff. And it was so much. I would be on for hours and hours, sometimes 12 hours a day. I'd be working between my kids and then the business. And then not to mention, I still had a husband. I still had to be mom to my daughters and not just, homeschool mom. I had to actually be fun mom and hang out mom. By the time my business really started to take off and get off the ground, I was exhausted and burnt out. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is crazy. I don't want to do this. And I think what happens is over time, you start to become numb to being visible. You almost do become afraid of being visible, but not for the reasons that people think. Not because now I'm worried about what you have to say and what you're going to think about it. It's the responsibility that it requires. It's the pressure that you feel around it. It's having to deal with all the stuff that comes with it and having to manage everybody else along with it, not just the audience, but then your family, yourself, your relationships. That's what the problem was for me. So by the time I started my YouTube channel back in July, I just didn't know if I wanted to do it again. It was just a lot of back and forth. Like, I don't know, because the last time I tried to do this, it wasn't worth it. It's almost like the success, even if it's successful, is it worth my sanity? Is it worth my peace? Is this something that I even want to do for the rest of my life? Like, I knew my kids weren't going to be little forever and I wasn't going to be homeschooling forever, but it still just took so much of my energy. And now I have a 4th one who's very high needs, by the way, that I am still actively homeschooling, and 2 of the older ones as well. By the way, shout out to my babies. They graduated this year, my 18-year-olds. But I just felt like any success that I would get from it wouldn't even be worth it. I wasn't sure. And that's why since 2018, I hadn't been consistent and I just kept jumping in and out of my business because I didn't realize at the time. But now in hindsight, I can see that it was just that my body didn't want to do it anymore. My body was literally betraying me or sabotaging me in a sense because it was just like, no. In my mind, I was like, I can do this. Let's do it. God is saying, do this, do it. And my body was just like, no, we're not going to do it. So it wasn't until this past year when God gave me permission to let go of social media and he really walked me slowly through it. And we started to do things our way. And I realized that this was the blueprint and this was the way that I was meant to do business. I was able to make peace with it. And like I said, because of that devotion to God, I didn't have to worry about people's expectations anymore or what people might say or whether somebody might leave or not like the channel or whatever, because I'm more secure in who I am now than I was before, even back in July of last year. And I know that the message that I'm given is straight from source. So I don't really have to worry about how other people feel about it, because if somebody doesn't like it or doesn't resonate with it, then that means it's just not for them. And I don't have to make that about me, right? So if somebody doesn't like something that I say or they don't like the message or whatever, that's okay. And so I really had to learn how to slowly move back into my business. And now that I've fully found my voice again, and I've truly stepped into an understanding of what I want and how I want to create my business, I've really started to walk out this blueprint that God gave me. And now I can see how my channel is ready for the growth that I've wanted and that I would have loved to have seen over this past year. But I feel like if God had done it any time before now, I would not have been ready for it. I'm better prepared, better equipped. Right? I needed to be this person for the growth to happen. And I didn't realize how unready I would have been if it had come any sooner than now. Whenever it starts to come, I understand that the more I allow God to prepare me, the more ready and regulated I'll be when things do pop off. But I wouldn't have been able to handle it then. So I learned how important it is to just let God be God. And it's okay for things to seem like it's taking longer, because that's something that we're always looking at. That was always a complaint that I had. Why does it always seem like it takes longer for everything that I'm doing? Because you have a big calling and you have a big mission and you have big work to do in the world. So it doesn't always come easy. And there are going to be forces that try to stop what you're doing and all of that. And you have to be the person who can handle that, who can handle the calling, who can handle all of it. It matters. Yeah. And this is something that I really want women who are, I would say, approaching or over 40 to really look at, because sometimes we want to operate like we're 20 something. Because I think that in this industry, there are a lot of 20-year-olds coming in and it feels like they're all surpassing us. I mean, I know that's how I felt over the past few months. But what I had to look at was that I'm not 20-something anymore. And women who are like me and who are around my age, we have lives, we have children. And I'm not saying that they don't have lives. As a matter of fact, when I was in my 20s, I had all of these things still. I got married at 20. I had my first child at 23 and my twins at 26. So honestly, in my 20s, I already had a full life. But most 20-something-year-olds out here, like my 21-year-old, they're not walking around with the responsibilities that we as 30-somethings or 40-somethings have going on. We have full lives, and we've had a lot of crap to deal with in our lives too. And so our lives and our nervous systems, honestly, don't look like somebody who's half our age. And our businesses, and I think that's what I had to learn. Our lives don't have to look like somebody that age, and our businesses don't either. We have to understand that we are in a different lane. We are in a different space. We get to live our life and run our businesses the way that we choose. And I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have this choice, because women who are 20 something or whatever have that same choice. The thing is, though, is that they have a lot more time to burn. They have a lot more time to explore and to learn and to try different methods and all of those different things. They have a lot of energy that we don't have, especially if you're over 40 and you're perimenopausal. And honestly, you could be perimenopausal in your 30s too. A lot of people just don't talk about that. And like I told y'all when I did my intro video, we're going to talk about that kind of stuff on this channel. Because if you're perimenopausal on top of all the other stuff that's going on in your life, it could just be a whole other mountain of things. And we don't need to pressure ourselves into running businesses like everybody else's that we see on the internet now. We just need to know that we're different, and it's okay that our businesses look different. And if people don't like it, it's not for them. And they can move on to somebody else who's doing things the way that they like it. It's simple. So if you're a woman out here who's in your 40s or above, or you're approaching 40s or whatever, and you're feeling like you just don't have the time, you don't have the energy, you don't have the capacity, and you're drained most of the time, because I think I told y'all in one of my last audios, like that's how I feel most of the time. Even as I'm regulating, God is still having to teach me how to rest. Because when you have a full life and a family and all of these other things tugging at you all the time, and then you still have to make time for yourself and time for your work and time for your clients and time for all the other stuff, like it's a lot. And then for women out here who are building it as a side hustle and you work a full-time job on top of that, like, come on. And I can tell you right now from experience over the past year, building my YouTube channel, when I took social media completely out the equation and I just decided that I'm not going to do that anymore and that I was just going to focus my energy on one thing because that's all I honestly had the capacity for, I found that this really wasn't that hard. And even though I wasn't as consistent as I would have liked to be, I looked at the fact that, okay, I have 20 something, about 25, 26 videos on my channel when I hit a year. That's basically loosely a video every 2 weeks. Even if it hadn't been consistently every 2 weeks, I was actually proud of that. On average, a video every 2 weeks with the life that I have, I was not mad at it. That was consistent enough for me. And somebody might look at that and be like, well, that's not enough. Or you should have been posting more. Some of these people out here I see doing videos multiple times a day. Okay, and some people are showing up every day. That's cool. It's just not for me right now. I had to look at that and really understand who I was, what my life looks like, and my nervous system, because that matters so much. And I don't think people are talking about it a lot now, but I don't think they talk about it enough. And so, yeah, when I look at my channel, I wish it had grown more and faster and all of those things, but I think it's okay because, like I said, I wouldn't have been ready for it anyway. In the condition that my nervous system was in, I wasn't ready for it. Now I feel more ready. And like I said, ready is a decision, but there's also things that you have to know about yourself. And that's what good support helps you with too. Learning how those things work, learning how your nervous system works, learning why things happen, what conditioning you have going on, all the things that go on underneath the surface that you can't always see. It's really important to understand those things. I love that God has me in a space where I'm moving back into my business in a calm, regulated way. And I think there are a couple of reasons that God is doing it this way. And I think I've shared this before, but I'll share it again here. For one, I know God wants me to remember that when I do pop off, because I know it's just a matter of time and not a long time either. But when things do pop off, he wants me to remember that it's him and not the audience or what I'm doing, the physical work that I'm doing on YouTube or whatever the case is. He wants me to know that it's him. Right? And then also when there's more people, there'll be more responsibilities, more things to worry about. And right now I'm in a peaceful place. And I'm not saying that I don't want to grow. It's just that I know what I can handle and I know what I couldn't handle up to this point, you know? Now I'm ready for the growth of my channel. And that's why I believe that it will happen fairly quickly now because of who I've become, who I chose to be. Because y'all know I don't really like that word become, right? So who I chose to be, which is who God created me to be in the first place. Okay. And then the sixth decision that I made, and the one I'm still really stepping into and embodying, is freedom. Because like I told you guys, I think I've said this in multiple Miracles Unscripted episodes, but freedom was my word for 2026. Miracles is always my word, and I might find another word sometimes, but freedom was my main word for 2026. And I actually didn't even choose any other words with it. I was serious about freedom because miracles is my literal brand. Like everything I do is about miracles. Everything I teach is about miracles, but freedom is probably a very close second. If not, it could be right up there with miracles because freedom is one of the most important things in my life. And so I decided that 2026 was going to be my year of freedom in every aspect: time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom, emotional freedom, spiritual freedom. And this has earned its own portal in the realm because freedom is everything to me. And I made the decision that freedom was going to be my foundation going forward. Like if it isn't freedom, I don't want it. And everything I've been building since then, since I made that decision, has been moving me towards freedom. And so one of the main things that I really want to talk about when it comes to freedom is freedom of expression, because I think this might be the area of freedom that we overlook the most. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it's the one that costs us the most when we don't have it. And Florence Scovel actually talks about this in her book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. If you have not read that book, you absolutely should. Okay. And she taught that there are 4 things that every human being basically is here to experience. And it's health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. She called it the square of life. And she taught that she believed that this is the life that God intended for us to have. And when we think about that, health, wealth, love, those are things that we all know that all of us desire to some extent. Even if you're not seeking millions or whatever, you still would love to have money. Nobody has to convince you that you want to be healthy or that you want to be abundant or that you want love in your life. Most people desire that. That's natural. It's obvious. But the perfect self-expression part, that's the one that people don't really recognize. It's the one that feels, for the people who understand it, maybe it feels more like a luxury instead of a necessity. But I don't even think most people are checking for freedom of expression, honestly. But what Florence Scovel was saying, and I truly believe this with everything, is that the perfect self-expression is just as essential as everything else. You cannot have a complete life in a full square without it. And the way she explained perfect self-expression is that every person has a divine plan for their life that only they can fulfill. All of us were created to do something specific. There was something that we were all specifically designed and created to do, say, and be. And when you are living in that perfect expression, everything flows from that. supply, abundance, the right people, the right opportunities, everything. It all flows to you naturally because you are in alignment with what God originally intended for you. And the thing that blocks perfect self-expression is fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being judged, fear of fully owning all of what God placed inside of you, fear of saying the wrong thing or showing up as the full version of who God created you to be because you think that you're too much. Freedom of expression is your voice. It's your truth. It is saying what God placed in you to say without shrinking it, without softening it, without apology, without hesitation, without feeling like you have to change who you are. It is the full embodiment of who you are, who God created you to be, the literal essence of God. And for the work that people like you and I do, I'm assuming that you're like me if you watch this channel, and for the calling that we have on our lives, this is everything. Like, this is one of the most important things because your voice is the miracle. Your expression is the portal. When you hold back, you hold everything back. That's why I was talking about one of my last audios about extinguishing your fire by trying to squeeze it into some little box on social media. That's why freedom had to be a portal in the realm, because I have to talk about all of these different facets of freedom. Because freedom actually is like the official last portal. I can't say that it's going to be the last portal because I still feel other portals trying to come through. It's very interesting, but I wanted it to kind of be the final portal because it's when I thought about it, freedom is like the culmination of everything, every decision, every surrender, every layer of sovereignty. It's all of that lived out loud, and it all leads you here. And I also placed it last because I'm still stepping into it myself, like I said, so this portal will grow with me. As the freedom continues to show up in my life in real evidence, I'll bring it straight to that space. So then you're not just learning about freedom and the different parts of it, but you're watching me become a walking testimony for it in real time. Because I'm really stepping into this era where I'm even being more bold and more audacious about the things that I'm teaching. I'm not softening my message or holding back when God gives me something to share. I'm really raw and authentic when I come out here. Like, I try to give it to you as real as I possibly can. There are some things that God will not allow me to share right now. And when we get to the point where I can really share, and I probably will be able to share a lot more in the realm than I can share publicly, but there are still things that God just really has not released me to share. But if I explain, like if I told you all of the decisions that I've made around freedom this year, I know that people are just going to be like, oh my God. You know what I'm saying? Like, I had to make some hard decisions if I wanted to be free. If I wanted to have freedom, there were decisions that I had to make. Like playing small and just being okay with everything wasn't going to work anymore. Like I said, even with my message, I'm not holding back anymore. When God gives me something to share, I'm going to share it with you, raw and authentic. Because there are times, you know, obviously I edit these audios and sometimes I say things and I'm like, you can't say that. You can't leave that there. Go ahead and delete that. But I'm getting to a point where you might start hearing some things and you just be like, whoa, did she really just say that? And I'm going to be like, yeah, I really said that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I said it. You're going to start seeing more of that because I'm coming to a place where I'm not going to be making any apologies about who I am and what I believe that God is telling me to share. You're going to get the fullness of me. And you always get me. I've always been giving you me, but sometimes we tend to soften up the message. I do it too. We're all guilty of it. And I think I talked about that in one of my last audios. I was just saying how we figure out what's okay to say and what won't get us a nasty comment or whatever. And I just had to realize, I mean, do I really care at the end of the day? If I'm doing what God called me to do, then why do I care about what somebody else is going to like or think or whatever? You'll be okay. I've had people telling me my whole life, even in my coaching business before I quit, people that were a little closer to me behind the scenes, they'd be like, you know, you shouldn't say this or you shouldn't say that to people when you're teaching or whatever. Well, I said it. And guess what? I'm going to keep saying it. And if you're triggered, good for you, because that means you recognize something within yourself that you can do some work around. Because first of all, you may want to ask yourself why you're triggered when somebody says something that you don't like or whatever. And doing some work around that might be a good thing for you, because integrating your shadow is how we grow and how we evolve and how we become more mature. The shadow is every part of you that you're taught to hide. The too loud parts of you, the too ambitious, the too raw, the too real, the too honest, the too much. I've been told that my entire life. You're too much. You talk too loud. You do too much of this, whatever. My mom would always tell me, sit down and be quiet, stay in a child's place, blah, 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 blah. And those parts of my personality, those are the parts of me that make me me. If I were to remove those parts of my message or who I am, then I would not be me anymore. And the parts of your personality and your desires and your expression that get labeled as a problem, or like I said, too much or whatever, or that make people uncomfortable, those are the things that make you you. So you have to get to a point where it doesn't matter how other people feel about what you have to say and who you are. And most women spend their lives managing that kind of stuff in their shadow. That's what I was saying about the visibility part of it. We spend so much time managing stuff like that we can't even show up and do the work that God is calling us to do, because we're trying to make sure that we don't offend anybody, and we hold back and we try not to show people who we truly are, our true colors, right? When it's who you are. I'm not telling you to come out here and share everything there is to share about you. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's important to integrate the parts of you that feel like they're too much or that people may perceive as too much. Because sometimes you're going to trigger people, and that's okay. You can't worry about whether you trigger people. If somebody's triggered by something, then it's their job to sit back and figure out why they're triggered. Because sometimes people are triggered because they don't have the boldness or the audacity to say the stuff that you're saying. Or, okay, somebody dropped an F-bomb and now you're mad because... And a lot of times people look at that and they think, oh, because, well, it's not ladylike or it's just not appropriate or it just doesn't sound right. I've heard that too. I'm definitely an F-bomb dropper. Most of the time when I'm around people, I'm around my type of people, so they don't think twice about it. But there are people, when you're in the public eye and you have a lot more than just your people around you, people have an issue with that, especially because I talk a lot about God too. So it's just like, well, how are you talking about God and then you dropping an F-bomb? But again, why are you triggered by that? That's really the question to ask yourself. Because a lot of times it's because people wish that they could be fully self-expressed, or they wish they could express themselves, and somebody throughout their life didn't allow them to do that. And so now they feel like they have to be buttoned up and speak a certain way and act a certain way, and they can't fully be themselves, and they're mad at you because you're doing it. Just a thought. So just because you're triggered by it doesn't mean that somebody can't say it. Just like somebody might look at me and say, oh, you know, she's talking about she's going to be a millionaire and she's doing this and doing that and doing the most, and she's acting like this or acting like that or saying things like this or saying things like that. Some people might be triggered by that. Like I told you, people get triggered when I say my husband has money or that I don't have to work or whatever. I mean, it's a fact. And if you're triggered by that, maybe you should look at why you're triggered. Is it because you don't think it's possible for you or because you don't have the same thing? Because I can tell you right now, if I have it, it's absolutely possible for you. And I'm glad that it triggered you, because now maybe by you looking at it and questioning why you're triggered by it can help you dig up some of the BS that you might believe around it. And you can see what's holding you back from having that. And honestly, it could just simply be that trigger. Oh, I'm triggered because I don't like people who say this or say that or whatever. They talk about how much money they make and all of that because rich people are this or rich people are that. Like whatever you think about whatever, those beliefs that you have around those things might be the issue. And when you realize like, oh, that's why I was triggered by this, maybe that realization can help you form a new belief, and then you can understand or see how it's possible for you too. So yeah, God was just like, okay, go out here and tell these people the truth. God sent me to interrupt those patterns, to help you step into the person that you were called to be. That is my job. Honestly, it's my job to trigger you sometimes. And if triggering you helps you become who you're meant to be, then so be it. I still love you. You might not still love me, but that's okay, because you're going to be better for it in the end. And I'm not going to make apologies for that. Because I'm not afraid to be the villain in somebody else's story. I'm not afraid to be the villain on social media. Like, I'm going to tell you the truth. And a lot of times people don't want to hear the truth because they want things to be the way that they were conditioned to believe. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to interrupt patterns, to interrupt BS, to let you know that this is not true. What's true is you are one with source. What's true is whatever you want is possible and probably inevitable, because if you had the desire for it, it lets us know that it's meant for you. Otherwise, you would not have had the desire. God wouldn't give you or allow you to have a desire for something that wasn't possible for you to meet. And I've been teaching this for over a decade, but all desire comes from God. There may be a little ego mixed into it or whatever. You might see something online and be like, oh, I want that too. That's okay though, because I feel like it wouldn't have come across your feed or you wouldn't have been able to see it if it wasn't something that was possible for you too. That's the way you have to receive everything in life. You got to know that if that's possible for you, it's possible for me. That's why I get out here and teach the things that I teach. Not so I can brag or share like I'm doing this and I'm doing that and all of this stuff is happening for me. No, it's so that you can know that it's possible for you too. That's why God sends me to deliver these messages, so that you can see what's possible for you too. So you got to be willing to let yourself be the villain in somebody else's story. You got to be willing to tell the truth, your truth, whatever that truth is that you feel on the inside, that's burning on the inside of you, because we all have it. Because everybody's truth, like there is, solid capital T truth that does not change. But the way we view life, all of us can see things differently, and that's okay. You share what you believe that God is teaching you to share. And if you're sharing something wrong, he'll correct you over time. You can't be worried about what everybody else thinks about what God gave you to talk about or what God gave you to share. You just share the thing as you feel it coming through. And as you grow, your message and everything else will evolve. And even your audience will evolve to be able to take the truth that you're sharing, because there's a specific audience for your message. Like there are people out there that are teaching hustle, and there's an audience for that. There are people who want to hear that message. That works for some people until it doesn't anymore. But that's a conversation for a different day, right? But I don't teach from hustle. I teach from surrender. I understand that when I surrender my life, my business, my finances, my marriage, all of it to God, God will help me move forward in the way that I need to move forward. When I give him the reins, then I can get the best possible outcome because I'm allowing him to give me his absolute best. I'm releasing the attachment to whatever the outcome is. Detachment is one of the biggest things in manifestation because you have to be willing to let things go, to release, to not be caught up. So yeah, detachment, even from people, from situations, from goals, even family, to be honest, partners, all of it. You got to be willing to let things go to receive what it is that God wants you to have. Everything and everybody is not meant to stay in your life forever. And when you start leveling up, when God is trying to get you to a new level, sometimes you can hold yourself back from that level because you won't let things go, because you won't release things, because you won't detach from things. You got to be willing to release and let things go. Let God give you his absolute best. Trust and know that no matter what's happening in your life, that's always God's goal. That's always his desire. That's always what he's doing for you behind the scenes. He's always working behind the scenes on your behalf to give you his absolute best. And sometimes we have to go through hell first because we don't listen, or because we're not being obedient, or because we're trying to hold on to things that we're not meant to hold on to anymore. So trust the process. Be authentic. Have audacity. Be the woman that God created you to be. And know that people are going to fall off when that happens because everybody can't handle the real you. And those people aren't meant to be in your life anyway. If you notice that people start falling off when you start accomplishing things, or you start becoming more bold, or whatever, you start speaking your mind more, or you start having boundaries, or you stop being a yes woman, or you stop being at their beck and call every time they want something or whatever, when people start to get upset about that, when people start to feel some kind of way, whatever about that, that lets you know, okay, this might not be a person that I need to keep around. And they'll probably fall off on their own. But if they don't, it's okay for you to say goodbye too. Hey, you know what? I don't think this is working. I don't really think that we're aligned. I don't really think that this is what I want anymore. I'm not really feeling a connection anymore. I'm not really feeling a vibe. Have a nice life though. And you got to be willing to be the villain in people's stories, because they're going to be mad and they're going to talk about you and they're going to say you did this and you said this and you acted like this, and when you got this you didn't like them anymore, or you treated them like this or whatever. Like, you know what? Okay. That's okay. I can be that. But I refuse to stay stagnant, to maintain relationships and friendships that aren't meant for me anymore. So, like I said, step into your full authentic expression. Stop editing yourself. Stop softening your voice, the edge that you have, the things that make you you. You don't have to perform for people so they're comfortable. You don't have to shrink yourself or make yourself less than or less too much so people can handle it. No. Be all of you. Be fully you. That's who God created you to be. Because people are going to decide that you're too much, or that you're the villain, or that you are too bold or too arrogant or too audacious or whatever. Okay. People aren't always going to appreciate your truth, and that's okay. It's not for them. They can move on to the next person. Because truth is relative to different people. There is capital T truth that stands, but there are other people's versions of truth. Like I said, there's people out here teaching hustle messages and they believe that that's truth. But you have to know that it's okay for you to be who you are anyway, regardless of what people think about it. That's what this era is about. That's what this whole life is about. You being fully who you are. Because the more you integrate your own shadow, and the more that you become more comfortable with who you are, the more detached you become, the more unbothered you become, the more you don't care about what anybody else is doing, because you're focused on you and what you're creating in your own life. All right? I feel like this message was all over the place, but yeah. I love you guys so much. I hope you're having a beautiful, extraordinary, miraculous day. And I'd love for you to join me in the Miraculous Millionaire Realm. This is where we have these kinds of conversations all the time. Every portal in the realm has specific topics. Like we talk about your power and your sovereignty and all of that in one portal. We talk about manifestation in another portal. We have prayers and declarations and affirmations, and talk about how to command your millions into existence in the Millionaire portal. In the Overflow portal, we talk about your business and how to source your content from God, straight from source. Overflow into the lives of others. In the Provision portal, we talk about getting paid to exist and how to create in the 5D instead of from the 3D and the 4D, so that you can be the absolute best you. Bring that woman that God created you to be forward, and stand in your power, stand in your sovereignty, stand in your audacity, so that you can live the life that you're meant to live, so you can create the things that you're meant to create. So you can experience the things that you're meant to experience. So yeah, I'd love to have you in the realm. If you've listened this far, also, please like, subscribe, hit that little notification bell so you can be notified when I drop the next audio. I love you guys so much. I will talk to you soon. Mwah. Lots of love and miracles.